Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with George Brooks, who is the CEO of Metta Association. Hey George, thanks for speaking with me today.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope everyone is well today.
Yes, so do I. What is Metta, in case anybody wants to know? That's METTA. What is Metta
Right.
Association?
Metta Association is a nonprofit I started up about 5 years ago after going through several things in life. It's a nonprofit that focuses on mental health, Black mental health, fighting recidivism, and fatherhood. And I've been able to keep the nonprofit going for over the 5 years through the pandemic. The word metta is a Buddhist word meaning to be inclusive of all. And I want to help as many people as possible. I'm gearing up for 2024 to be our biggest year yet. So your support and donations are definitely needed and appreciated. So Metta Association is really out there to try to help people, to try to spread the message about mental health, to try to spread awareness, to try to spread resources and things that people can use to help themselves to deal with their mental illness and emotional wellness.
Going into my own experience, I think that when we had all the lockdowns in place, I don't think that they helped people with these issues, really. That's putting it lightly. I think my own mother's Alzheimer's, for instance, got worse through not being able to be with people and having that being on her own all the time. I don't think that helped her, and I think that made her Alzheimer's get worse really quickly. And I think that's a problem with a lot of mental health issues, probably, is people being or keeping a distance in essence, because I think you need that connection to help people be able to hold on to that semblance of sanity that they've got.
And that's the thing. The real thing with mental illness is first to destigmatize it, is to get people to try to understand that you don't have to be standoffish, that in fact, they can be detrimental to the person dealing with a mental illness, to understand what it is and to really accept the fact that we are all, regardless of race, income, social status, we are all affected by mental illness. And we have to get to where we're comfortable in ourselves and our own mental stability to help those that are dealing with mental illness and to not be an entity that makes them feel shame or ridicule. So it's about destigmatizing mental illness and educating people about it and exactly what it is.
So what actual work does Metta do then? I'm guessing that I do know that you actually set up, what am I thinking of? You set up events for people to go to be able to speak, to be able to listen to people and get advice from people. And you do one-to-one as well for people at the same time. So what is it that you do, all these different things that you do, and how do you do these things?
Okay. In the past, we've held events. I held an event in my hometown of Memphis. That was a speaker's event. We've done food drives in the past. I do a lot of personal advocacy. I have people that call me one-on-one needing help with issues, and I try to assist them the best way I can. I also do a lot of public speaking. That's really the main forefront of what I'm focusing on right now, because that's what's really going to reach people. And I use my testimony and my story of things I've been through to try to help with that. I try to serve maybe too many masters sometimes with my nonprofit. I'm just trying to help in any area that I can, any area that finds people being of need that I can bleed into and work my resources, try to help people on any level, even if it falls out of the auspices of what I dictated for Metta Association to be, is what I will endeavor to do.
Because I've noticed that through the work that you're doing, it's a wide scope that you're looking at, because you look at the mental health and then you look at equality as well, and people being treated equally, and looking at people's rights and trying to help people with these things. And it's, as much as people might just think, oh, these are just these little things, they're not. Inside these individual things, such as the mental health and the social rights and all these things, inside those, you've got a huge scope inside these individual things as well.
Because the area of mental health is so wide ranging in terms of what it affects. In that regard, we do have to broaden our scope because it's not just a matter of the advocacy or the dealing with the medication or dealing with that. There are social implications and societal implications that come with dealing with and living with a mental illness that we have never addressed. And we're at a point by our own neglect, by not dealing with it, by hiding it, by ostracizing people dealing with it, we've put ourselves behind the eight ball. Is that we have a lot more work to do to get to a point where there is some parity, where there is a sense of where even those living with severe mental illnesses can have an equal point to where they can start off and excel and live a full life. We're playing a lot of catch up right now, but we have people in place that are doing that. I'm blessed to have a wonderful cabal of associates that I deal with, and we're all out here doing the work.
Yeah, mental health. One of the things that jumps out at me would be some people will look at mental health and look at crime at the same time, and that's an issue that is almost missed in a way. I think in a lot of cases, some mental health issues are not spotted because people aren't there looking for these things and trying to help these things. And it happens a lot with crime, where you'll find that a lot of criminals have got mental health issues, and it's a bad thing. I remember when I was younger, it wasn't crime based, but I remember that because I was abused as a child and then into our adulthood, that still affected me in a mental way. Some people would use drugs and alcohol and substances, and I did the same, in essence, to try and combat those issues. And I think a lot of people do that, where they'll almost self-medicate on substances that they shouldn't be doing to try and negate those things that cause them these problems.
Right. In terms of crime in the U.S., the number one provider of mental health care in this country is the American penal system, because oftentimes those dealing with mental illness are misdiagnosed. They're oftentimes in situations, and sometimes they just make bad decisions that facilitate their involvement with the criminal justice system. So part of why we fight recidivism is that we can't necessarily always stop people from going to jail, but what we can do on the back end is make sure they have what they need in terms of resources, in terms of social programs, in terms of understanding of what they've been through to deal with their mental illness. Because many of those in this country that are incarcerated are dealing with mental and emotional issues. And as someone who dealt with a 10-year addiction myself, you are spot on when you say that a lot of it is self-medication. It's to quiet the noise in your head. It's to deal with the trauma that you didn't even deal with from your childhood or from your life. It's to help stop the pain. But the thing is, it ends up making everything a lot worse. I think
Absolutely.
that's really the key to stopping addiction, is to deal with the unresolved trauma that caused the addiction and not just focus on the addiction itself. We want to focus on the cure, not just the symptoms. Yes, we need to treat the symptoms of the disorder, of the disease, of the choice, but yet at the same time, we have to deal with the cause of it and the core root of what causes people to fall into addiction in the first place.
Hey, this is Chris from Podtastic Audio, the show that I have created to help you create your amazing podcast. And you are listening to Pods Like Us.
Going into that with the incarceration, that was something that really jumped out at me from when you were speaking about it on one of the shows that you were a guest on. And I thought, you're right, because in this country and in some other countries, we have some systems in place where there are, for mental health with crime, there are places where they can go to that aren't a prison. They're specifically set for that sort of thing. But even then, even over here, even though I say that in the UK, it's still few and far between. And there's still some that fall through the cracks. Nobody's perfect with these things, but it needs to be looked at. And in essence, even in this country, and in all countries with these things, there needs to be a system in place where they're keeping things in check and making sure that these systems that are wrong, they're always trying to better, so that they might not reach the 100% perfection, but they're aiming towards that.
There needs to be a more concerted effort to treat those with mental illness, and not just those with mental illness, but those with any disability. I found that in my work in my hometown of Memphis and in adopted home of Dallas, that oftentimes those with any disability fall through the cracks. And it's more so with mental illness because a mental illness is not apparent. You can't see it. It's not something that's obvious or like that. So people have a harder time grasping it because it's more abstract to them. That's just something that you can see. You can see signs of it. And the thing is, a lot of times with mental illness in this society, we don't know what mental illness actually looks like. We may have this preconceived notion that it may be somebody rambling to themselves on the street corner, but we don't know it's that guy that's working 9 to 5 with 5 kids that's dealing with something. They may be drinking a little bit too much. They may be going through something. And we don't want those situations to get where they become a powder keg in terms of not dealing with one's mental and emotional health, where they become dangerous to society and to people as individuals also.
These issues have been going on for years. For instance, I mean, I was listening to a show the other day. Shout out to the wonderful show, Womanic, where they talk about strong women in the past and things and what they did to change things. And they were on about an actress. And I just noticed this in passing, and just because it hit a nerve in a sense. And they were talking about the actress Vivian Leigh. Apparently, because they didn't know about it at the time, she actually suffered from bipolar. And obviously, bipolar, nobody knew about bipolar until the 1980s. And there's various people in celebrities now and from the past that have suffered from it. It jumped out at me because that's the sort of thing where you look into the history of it, and these things back in the day, they would just throw them into an institution and essentially forget about them back in the day. And we've only come a step away from that situation now, where, like you said, people aren't noticing these things. And it's things like bipolar where people have things to keep themselves in check. So you don't see these things in people because they're hiding them essentially, and those around them are hiding them. But it's there, and that's one of the big problems.
Right, because in my own personal journey with mental illness, I began to realize I had mental health issues about age 7. And one thing I've learned how to do is how to mask my emotions, how to mask what I'm feeling. I could be perfectly calm and smiling, but have a storm going on inside my head and inside my heart. Because that's a survival mechanism for those of us dealing with mental illness, is that we can't always articulate what's going on with us. So we learn to hide, we learn to mask, we learn to lie about how we feel or what's going on, and we learn to manipulate. That's just a survival mechanism. It doesn't make us bad people, because that's usually not the case. Usually those of us with mental illness are the ones getting victimized. So it's a lot to deal with. And in terms of bipolar disorder, I've heard of it being called manic depression. That's what it used to be known as. And that goes far back into the 60s as far as my knowledge goes. So it's not new, but it's something that we're starting to understand. We're starting to understand mental illness, especially bipolar, because that's my diagnosis. But that's something we're starting to understand as a social construct, something we're starting to understand as a biological phenomenon. And through that, I think the cure is getting much better, but it has a long way to go. But until we continue to chip away at the boulder of the stigma of mental illness, nothing's really going to advance much further than where it has. And while I'm happy that things have advanced this far in this short amount of time, we still have a very long way to go.
We do. And when people are incarcerated, one thing that they could have is possibly better medical staff, where they have people there to be able to diagnose these things and have one-to-ones, maybe with somebody in the background just in case, with them, a member of staff, one of the people that work there. But then you'd have these medical people working there who are professionals and who can diagnose these things and look into these things with these essentially people that are put into jail.
And the thing is, staffing and having quality clinicians and those that are administrators and workers with those with mental health has to be something that needs to be raised in terms of the bar. We have to have people that are dedicated. We have to have people that are well trained and that are able to deal with those situations that often come up. You're dealing with someone with mental. So there has to be a tremendous amount of compassion. There has to be a tremendous amount of understanding from those working with those with mental illness. Now, if you don't, then you have a system that's going to be rife with abuse and neglect. And we definitely need more resources. We need more beds for those with mental illness. We need more facilities. We need better facilities. We need places in transition and aftercare plans and all these things that through my nonprofit Metta Association, I'm working to try to put in place. And that's my duty. That's my purpose that God has for me. It's just to try to do what I can. but I'm able to help people by pointing out, we need to do this, we need to do that. So I'm looking to collaborate with people. I'm looking to do public speaking. I'm looking to travel. I'm looking to do whatever I got to do every day to make sure that those that went through what I went through and are going through what I'm going through don't have to feel the way I felt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if they approach these things in that sort of way, you're going to with those people who have mental health issues that are in these places, you then cut down the possibility of recidivism then, because for anybody wanting to know, recidivism is basically repeated habitual relapse into specific things. We're talking crime at the moment, where people will relapse into crime based on their own mental health, which is what's causing them to do this repeated exercise. If you hit these things head on and you see these things and do something about them, you cut down the chance of them actually relapsing and doing this repeated almost thing that they repeat, because it's like they're within them to keep doing these things. If you have somebody there that's actually working towards helping these people, you cut down the chance of them doing that.
And the thing you have to keep in mind, I'm not sure where it is in other parts of the world, but I know in the U.S. there is a prison industrial complex. There's an entire industry built on incarceration. The powers that be and those that profit aren't necessarily interested in healing those that are dealing with incarceration, especially from a mental health standpoint, because that's basically them cutting off their inventory. Those systems survive and thrive off reoffenders. They basically, the thing is that prison is punitive, but it should be some point rehabilitative, because the thing is, most of those people in jail are going to come back out into society. If you relegate it to something that's just punitive, where is the healing? Where is the part that's going to make them viable members of society once they are released? What's going to make them contributors to the society instead of detractors from society? But there's a prison system. There are private prisons here. There are whole industries predicated on there being inmates. So that's one thing we have to combat. We have to find a way to needle our way through that and navigate that to make sure that people get help in the best way that we can see fit.
Hey, this is Danny from 1 Minute Podcast Tips, the show that helps you be a better podcaster in just a minute a week. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
Something else that jumped out at me was, did you take part in the mission trip to Jamaica with the Terry Foundation, or was that something that you were just promoting?
You can repeat the last part of your question.
Yeah, I read on your Instagram page something about a trip to Jamaica with Terry Foundation, and I wondered if you were part of that, or if it was just something that I noticed you were promoting.
There's something that you just noticed I'm promoting. As far as this year, I'll be looking to collaborate with more nonprofits. And if you follow me on social media, which is George P. Brooks on Facebook, and we have a new site coming up, mettaassociation.org. That should be up in the next couple of weeks. You'll be able to follow our collaborators. You'll be able to support them as well, because they support us. And I believe in symbiotic relationships, in reciprocal relationships in life and in terms of business. And the thing about running a nonprofit is that we oftentimes forget it's a business. In order to do the work, we have to be fiduciarily sound. We have to have things in place. We have to have profit and loss. We have to have marketing. And that's really what drives doing the work. So I do promote like-minded organizations. I do promote people that are doing the work as well. So if you follow me on social media, you'll see who I'm supporting, and you see who I stand behind, and you see who I believe in as far as doing the work to help improve mental illness for all people.
It's all good work that you are promoting, whether it's the work that you're doing or the works that you're promoting for other people as well. So I've got here, what is it? Finding direction in life. Yep. I enjoyed your discussion as well on Conversations with Kings as well, when you were speaking about living and people basically being parents, but with a mental illness as well.
I'm a parent with a mental illness, and I raised a son with a mental illness, and it's just more challenging. You have to really try to balance so much more, because not only do you have the responsibility of taking care of your child with a mental illness, you have the responsibility of making sure that you're okay, because you don't ever want a parent in a position where you're compromised. So sometimes that means relying more on your therapy, on your medication, to make sure that you're okay, so that you can be the best parent that you possibly can be, especially dealing with a child with a mental illness who in today's day and time has its own unique challenges. So parenting while mentally ill It's doable, but it's difficult, and it can be just as rewarding as someone who does not have that to deal with.
Absolutely. Definitely. So we've got your professional history. We've talked about Metta Association and how to approach mental health and wellness. We've only touched the surface. It's a huge
Right.
subject. In essence, really, I could go to this now in a sense. In essence, you need a podcast about these subjects to be able to look at them in their individual different subjects, because it's not one big subject. It's lots of little different subjects that's under one umbrella, essentially. And I believe you're looking towards doing a podcast yourself at some point.
Called the Metta Mindset. We're going to launch later this year. I'm working on another podcast with my dear friend, a wonderful therapist, Chanel Baptiste, down in Austin, Texas. So I'm looking to get out there and promote myself and promote my cause. I feel that by me doing these appearances, and thank you for having me on, that we're spreading the word one by one in terms of mental health. We're doing what we need to do to make sure that we can facilitate healing, progress, things like that. That's really what we're working on and what we're endeavoring to do.
So what was your initial introduction to podcasts then? When did you start listening to them? And was it based on your own history with mental health? Is that what the sort of shows that you started listening to, or do you listen to a wide variety?
I'm an audiophile. I like listening to different kinds of music and podcasts and different shows. And I started back in the 90s when I got on the internet back in 1994, listening to different broadcasts and things like that. So it's something I've always had so much energy for.
Yeah.
And I really started doing appearances like maybe 2 years ago. And it's been great fun. It's been a great run. I've learned a lot. But I feel like now that podcasting is so accessible to many people that you're going to really see a wide range of topics covered. And it's just my hope that those topics that are covered really, really help people, because we have venues now, we have opportunities with the advent of social media. Everyone has a voice, good or bad. Not everybody deserves a voice, but everybody has a voice. It's just been a matter of spreading awareness and doing those things that are going to try to hopefully make the world a better place.
Let's just say the good thing about podcasting is that you will get, for the most part, you'll get real people speaking really about subjects.
Right.
But at the other side of the coin is a bad part of podcasting is that you've got real people talking about real subjects, because some people, it's life essentially. It's not sugar coated like a television show or like a professional big corporation. A lot of them now are just people in their own room like we are now, just speaking as they are with nothing they're hiding who they are.
Well, basically with no filter. And that can be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
It really can be. So it really just depends on the facilitator of the person hosting the podcast and what their vision for their show is. It's the new Wild West. Everyone, all you need is a laptop or a phone and you can do a podcast. But the thing is to make sure that the guests we have are measured, to make sure that they're not just ranting, that they bring something substantive to the conversation. And by doing that, we can gain from their insight and progress further.
During your listening to shows over all this time, what lessons would you say that you've learned from those shows that you are going to use in the future when you do start your own podcast?
A lot of it is more technical in terms of the public speaking. It's things like having an outline, having bullet points, getting your story, getting your verbiage across the right way. So technically, it's been very rewarding, but also just a great exposure from hearing different voices, from hearing different people, from hearing different perspectives. That's what's been helpful, because there have been some things that I was stalwart on that I was not willing to relent on as far as different mindsets or thinking, but I've had some people help me look at things from a different perspective. And if you go into it with an open mind, it can be a wonderful place and a wonderful activity for you to partake in, because we are not always the same person. I'm not the same person I was a month ago. And with that, through interacting with other people and hearing divergent opinions and different stories, we can craft our narrative and how we feel about things in a way that's more unique to who we are.
Completely agree with that. Through this show, I think I'm a completely different person to the person I was more than 3 years ago when I first started. I think the constant chatting to people has opened me up as a person and made it easier for me to speak with people. In essence, the more that you use a certain part of your self, the better that you get at it in some ways, and you change constantly through life anyway, or you try to.
Very true.
What has your listening been like since you first started? Did you start a certain way and then you listened to more things and more subjects and different types of shows since?
I'm the type, I'm an egalitarian, first of all,
Yeah.
but I like to study various subjects. Anything that holds my interest, anybody that knows me knows I kind of get obsessed about it and study it ad nauseum. So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. I've learned things that from other areas that have inspired and motivated me and influenced me in terms of my mental health work. I believe you can take inspiration from anywhere. Even if you're a SpongeBob fan, you can take something from SpongeBob. It just depends on what you take from it. I've been fortunate. I've been able to take in a lot of media, take in a lot of different opinions. I do a lot of reading, like the Book of Five Rings by Masashi Miyamoto, The Richest Man in Babylon, things like that. I study a lot of Stoicism. So I've been able to incorporate that into who I am as a person and as a mental health advocate.
I, I can see where you're coming from. You hinted at something just then, and we're going into a tangent now, and we haven't yet. And I'm going to say that media and entertainment, in essence, like you said with the SpongeBob thing, it's strange because these things, as much as people who are creatives say these things are just things that they've created and there's nothing about them in it, I'm not 100% sure that I really believe that. As somebody who writes music, I've got my guitars and my keyboard over here and other instruments at the back of me. As much as I might say, oh, that song doesn't say anything about me, it does. And these things that people create, there's little messages that people get into them. The famous one would be in the 60s when all the Star Treks, for instance, they had social conscience messages hidden, not very well hidden, I might add, in the background, trying to tell people things about race, about sexuality and how things should be better and this, that, and the other. And so I do think that entertainment is a mirror to the way that things are at that point around them. And that's how people who are creatives get those things out there.
Right. But being a creative, you really have, it's really a blessing in the sense that you have the ability to always submit your commentary on society through your
Yep.
art. If you're a painter, you can paint what you're feeling, you can paint within society and how it makes you feel. Being a guitarist, you can write a song that articulates that. I'm somewhat of a creative myself. I write, I draw. I'm looking to get into music. I'm trying to do some acting. That's another thing that's really, I'm fortunate in that I can articulate my feelings on society and my feelings in general through those mediums. The one thing that I espouse as a treatment, as an adjunct to dealing with your mental health, is try to get into something creative. Even if you can't draw a line, try to draw something, try to get something to externalize those feelings and to express that in a way that not only relieves you and absolves you of a lot of pain and discomfort, but it gives the world a chance to see what's going on, to see what it's like, to see what you're feeling and to see who you are.
I'm a huge advocate for these things, such as I've spoken with people who teach music in certain places for people who have mental health issues. Music
Right.
is a big thing that people will do. And I believe the same for acting and for like you said, art, as in painting, anything really that helps them, that it's in a sense just centering them, and it helps them
Right.
to calm and gives them something to put their mind to keep the semblance of who they are in essence. And it also gives them something where they have a sort of pride where, oh, I couldn't play this instrument this time, but 4 weeks later, I know these 3 chords on a guitar and I can do this chord pattern and play and do this song with this. And this sort of those things that give them that positivity, because a lot of it is negativity that makes their mental health worse. Where if you give them
Right.
something to make them feel more positive, that helps them and boosts them up.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's definitely true because we have to have outlets for what goes on with us, especially mentally and emotionally. You have to, that internalization of things, especially in terms of Black media, has really damaged us. But we can no longer just internalize those things and sit on those feelings and not find a way to deal with them or address them or to allow them to manifest themselves in a healthy way that's going to be conducive toward healing. So that's something that we really need to work on. And I think we've made a lot of progress, but you have to find what works for you. And you have to be open toward healing with therapy, with talking, with even your spirituality is an important part. Even what you eat is important because the majority of serotonin is generated from the gut. So what you eat is important. I've noticed this personally. So there's so many things that tie into mental health, but really mental health is integral because along with our physical health, without it, we cannot function. We cannot do anything. So just like people endeavor to go to the doctor to get their physicals done, they have to endeavor to deal with their mental and emotional health as well.
Absolutely. So we've done that. So when you're listening to podcast, I'm trying to get into the weeds here in essence,
Right.
as somebody who makes podcast. And in essence, I'm being asked by other podcasters, when I speak to people who listen to podcast and haven't started their own at the moment, that they will keep asking me these questions, podcasters will. So when you're looking at a podcast show, what are you looking for in, not just in subject, but is there a certain style of production or a certain style of structure that these shows have that you look for? Or are you more bothered about the subject in hand and what they're talking about than the actual production and the way that they approach it?
To me, what's more important than production or the subject matter, because I can talk about anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just can't. But it's the tone of the interviewer. I like more conversational podcast experience. I think those are the ones where I'm able to really articulate, and I think to articulate what's going on, and we really get to some good stuff once it's more conversational. So one thing I look for is someone that can be rigid. Yeah, you can have your outline for me as a guest or questions, but should we feel free to delve off the beaten path and get into some things that are maybe real issues or things that I'm dealing with at the time, or things that the host is dealing with at the time, or things in society. We need to have latitude and room to do that. And that's really what I look for.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Hey, it's Gil from the Mind Podcast. Today's mind culture and social podcast. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
Okay, so what I've got here 3 life tips. What are 3 tips that you would suggest to people that would be helpful to them?
Be patient with yourself. That's one thing that I had to learn, and I'm still learning. Be patient with yourself. Understand that you cannot judge yourself according to what someone else has done. You are your only competitor. Compare yourself to where you were a month ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That should be your only barometer for where you are in the progress that you're making. If you're driving and you're steadily looking in the car next to you, you're going to have an accident. Stay in your lane, focus on yourself, be patient, work on yourself. Number 2 is take care of your physical health. And I'm somewhat of a hypocrite on this, try not to consume things that are not going to be beneficial to your physical health. Try to make sure you get some exercise. Try to make sure you stay active, even when you're going through a depression or you're going through something mentally. My friend Shannon Albatsi, she always advocates for getting sun, walking in the grass barefoot, things like that. Do things like that to take care of yourself physically. And third, and really in a way, most importantly, is to try to treat other people. I'm a believer in karma. When we go through something, it's usually as a result of something that we've done, or good or bad. So try to treat people, try to be compassionate. When you ask someone how their day is going, actually mean it sometimes. And those are my 3 tips.
I'm going to say this one again. And I can't believe that I'm saying this again, but before Christmas, you said that about compassion for people. And so before Christmas, I was in town with my other half, and we're going for some jabs for something. We get the flu jab every year, cut down on possibility of getting influenza. So we went into town to get those. And while I was in town, I saw, because we have a magazine in the UK called Big Issue, which that magazine is sold by the homeless, and the money that they make from that, they get a percentage of, and the rest of it goes into what's called Shelter, which is an organization that looks after the homeless. So I was in town and saw this obvious homeless lady selling this magazine. And I'll preface this by saying that I have a donation that comes from my account to Shelter every month anyway. So I'm always giving to Shelter and other organizations. So I'll preface it with this. So I saw this lady there in town, and I just saw that she seemed to be cold because she had a scarf around her face, and she had a woolly hat on and was basically trying to stay warm. So as opposed to buying this really thick magazine that essentially I wasn't probably going to read anyway, but I also give to that organization that makes the magazine anyhow. I thought another option to do was, and which I took, was I walked up to her and asked her what hot drink would she want, how she takes the hot drink. And then I went to a place that sells coffee and tea, and she wanted tea. So I got a tea to exacting, what she wanted, the milk and the sugar that she takes. And I bought her a couple of chocolate cookies as well, and then handed them to her, because my thought was that I was handing over to her something that was more important than her taking 50 pence or a pound of that money from the sale of the magazine. I thought it was more important in that moment. She needed that cup of tea and that for sustenance, because she'd been out there for about 8 hours solid trying to sell this magazine. And afterwards, I was saying to my other half that even though money is sometimes tight and situations aren't good, I said that in essence, the thing that you've got to remember, and you really have to do this, is you don't lose who you are and the humanity of life. You don't lose that humanity. You always make sure that you're looking at what other people are going through, even if you're going through bad times at the same time. If you can see this and do something about that, that in essence is one of the greatest things in life, is noticing that and helping those people out.
And that's definitely true. And I'm glad you brought up losing our humanity. I think there's something in our society that we're starting to lose, because everything is so antiseptic, and we see wars on TV and it's not real to us. It's like we're almost living in a video game sometimes when we look at our fellow man.
Yeah.
Because the lens that we look at it through in terms of social media and TV, and we are losing our humanity. And that's why I encourage people to get out and put the phones down and try to get out and meet people and be around people and try to volunteer at events. If you want to understand about mental illness, go volunteer at a mental health organization. If you like animals, volunteer there, because those nonprofits and organizations are reliant on that volunteer work, on those donations, on those gestures, on that $5 or £5 that you extend to them, because it goes toward helping toward them addressing the cause that they chosen to endeavor upon. So, but we have lost our humanity. And I was glad to hear that what you just said, because you thought about the person, not just the gesture. Otherwise, you could have just bought the magazine and said, she'll get us eventually. But you saw a need there immediately and you addressed it. And I commend you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. So what advice would you give to podcasters or people potentially becoming podcasters?
Have fun. Have fun, because you're going to stumble, you're going to make mistakes, but the minute things stop being fun, then you're probably not going to do it. Try to have fun, be unique, be who you are. Don't try to ascribe to what someone else has done. Yeah, you can be derivative, but not verbose. And what I mean by that is you take elements from a podcast that you're a fan of, but try to make it your own. Try to make it your own and just have fun with it and see what comes of it, and try to monetize it and try to maximize it and really commit to it and really do it as though it's something that's important to you. If it's not, then you won't last anyway. But for those that really want to do something, put your all into it, put your effort into it, and you'll see you'll get out what it is that you put in.
I like the thing that you said about derivative, essentially inspire, be inspired by these other podcasts. It's like music. You be inspired by these people and then take those different inspirations and add yourself to it to make something that is 100% you based on the inspiration. It's like the rock band Queen. They're influenced by this sort of music, that sort of music, that sort of music. Another one, Bites the Dust, is based on soul and disco and music like that.
Wow.
And this is based on that type of music. But when they do it, it's essentially Queen. It's not them being a carbon copy of this person. Kendrick Lamar is not basically a rehash of Stevie Wonder, although he is a part of the inspiration that inspires him.
And that's exactly the thing, because there are a few things in the world now that are really original. Don't worry about necessarily being original. Just be who you are. Just be who you are. Feel confident in your voice and just do the best you can as far as doing the podcast. Try to get to where you know who you want to have on guest wise. Try to get to where you have more of a conversation than an interview.
Yep.
To me, those are really the good ones, the ones that are more conversation. So that's the advice I would give you. Be conversational and try to have fun doing it.
If you need something like I have with this list of notes to follow. If you need that to be able to make the show work, and I think it helps a lot, remember essentially what you're saying is you could have that, but you've got to be open to catch those little bits and let the conversation flow, as opposed to it just being ask the question, get the answer, ask the question, get the answer. Let the conversation come into it. So if things come up, you've got to be able to pick up on these things and be like, oh, where will that road take me if I go down there?
Exactly. Yeah, it should be an adventure. Every podcast that you have a guest on should be an adventure to find out about them and find out maybe more about yourself.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah. I tried to hide that it's about me as well, but there you go. It is true. So what podcast shows would you suggest to people that you like that people should probably try and listen to or check out?
I listen to podcasts that are aligned with my personal interests. Like I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, so I listen to a lot of pro wrestling podcasts, retro video game podcasts, comic book podcasts. I really don't necessarily listen for work unless I'm going to be on the show, but I listen to things that are in line with my hobbies, that are aligned with my interests. So I spend a lot of time on YouTube watching different shows and content. I probably watch more YouTube than I do TV.
Yeah.
Really hadn't watched TV in about 5 years, seriously, but I listen to things that make me happy, that help me relax. Like I'm probably going to do some video games today if I have time. So I'm probably going to watch a podcast like that. Just something just to be fun and be light. And that way, when I have to go into the heavier areas, it's not as burdensome. So yeah, you just try to watch what you enjoy. Watch new things, watch different things. I watch things about subjects that I'm interested in, like Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Stoicism, those kind of things. So that's really what I enjoy watching.
That's great. Where can people find you and get hold of you then, George?
All right. You can reach me on Facebook under George P. Brooks. We will have our site up in a couple of weeks, Metta, META Association.org. You can also call me in the US. My number is 901-631-4300. I'm available for public speaking, collaborations, willing to travel, just anything that's going to help in terms of helping those with mental health and helping those in other issues too. I also speak on fatherhood, addiction, relationships, community efforts, all those sort of things. And the best way to get in touch with me is to email me at gbrooks, GBROOKS @mettaassociation.org.
Thank you very much. Anyway,
Thank
you can find Pods Like Us on any streaming platform, on Apple, on I'm losing it now, Spotify, Amazon, Google. I don't think Google's doing podcasts anymore, actually. I think they've finished and Deezer's finished as well. And we're also on Roku as well. If you go to Pod Nation, you can watch a video version of the show. And we have a YouTube page. Just look for Pods Like Us on any of these places, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok and Threads as well. And contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. We do have a Patreon, which is just look for Pods Like Us. And because I'm English, £1 per month, you get extra little shows where I do reviews of podcasts or I do a podcasting diary as well. And anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.